Imagine a heavy gray cloud pressing against the inside of your forehead. You feel it there, a thick, swirling mass of ideas that refuse to take a definite shape. This is the daily reality for the modern human, a character we will call the thinker. Every morning, the thinker wakes up to a world overflowing with information, and as the day progresses, their mind begins to resemble what we call the nebula. The nebula is not just simple confusion. It is a chaotic, multidimensional storm of abstract concepts, raw emotions, and half-remembered memories. It is the weight of everything you know but cannot yet say. We often assume that our thoughts are like books, neatly arranged on shelves and ready to be read. But in reality, before you speak or write, your mind is a vast, interconnected network where a single feeling might be linked to a smell from 20 years ago, a complex mathematical principle, and a sudden urge to buy bread. These thoughts do not exist as neat, linear sentences. They are vibrations, sparks, and sensations that exist in a state of constant flux. When you are suffering from cognitive overload, it feels as though the nebula has grown too large for your skull to contain. You have the sensation of being brilliant and lost at the very same time. There's a specific kind of frustration that occurs when a brilliant idea feels complete and perfect inside your head, but the moment you try to explain it to someone else, it falls apart. This is the cognitive compression problem. The human brain is a master of compression. It can take massive amounts of complex sensory data and fold them down into a single fleeting intuition. Inside your mind, you see the entire picture at once. You feel the truth of a concept without needing to justify it. However, the world outside your mind is linear. To share an idea, you must take that multidimensional nebula and force it through the narrow straw of language. You must pick one word to follow another in a specific order, according to specific rules. This process is often difficult. In the transition from a lightning strike of intuition to a spoken sentence, something is always lost. The nuance evaporates, the emotional weight thins out. This is why you might find yourself stuttering or trailing off, saying that you know what you mean, but you just cannot find the words. The thinker is constantly battling this friction, trying to export the richness of internal consciousness into the flat, two-dimensional world of human speech. It is a struggle between the infinite complexity of the inner self and the limited bandwidth of the outer world. To solve this, we have always searched for tools that can help us see what we are thinking. This brings us to the core realization of our journey. Language is not just a way to talk to others. It is the ultimate mechanism for cognitive externalization. It is a tool we use to pull the chaos out of our heads and lay it onto a table where we can finally look at it. Throughout history, we have used journals, maps, and conversations to do this. But today, a new player has entered the mental workspace. We call this secondary character the AI, or more accurately, the mirror. Imagine the thinker sitting in a quiet room, bathed in the soft glow of a screen. Before them lies the blank prompt box. This empty white rectangle is more than just a software feature. It is a point of confrontation. When you stare at that blinking cursor, you are forced to stop the swirling motion of the nebula. To get the machine to do anything, you must first perform the difficult work of turning your abstract fog into concrete symbols. You are staring at a digital void that demands clarity. It is here, at the interface, where the internal meets the external. The AI does not judge your confusion, nor does it feel the weight of your stress. It is a sterile, symbolic environment that waits for you to make the first move. By trying to explain your complex problem to a machine, you are actually being forced to explain it to yourself for the very first time. The thinker's experience is universal. We have all felt that heavy pressure behind the eyes when we have too much to do and not enough clarity on how to start. We call it stress, but perhaps it is better described as a lack of mental architecture. Our thoughts are floating in a gravity-less environment, bumping into each other without purpose. This is the nature of the unarticulated mind. It is powerful, but it is inefficient. The transition to the digital interface represents a shift in human evolution. We are moving from thinking purely inside our biological containers to a state of distributed cognition. We are learning to use the external world as a temporary hard drive for our complex emotions and logical puzzles. This shift is not about the machine being smart. It is about the machine being a perfect empty room where we can finally unpack our heavy bags. As the cursor blinks, the thinker takes a deep breath. The first words are always the hardest to find. They are the anchors that will hold the rest of the conversation in place. By defining the problem, the thinker begins to see the borders of their own confusion. The fog starts to thin, not because the problems have gone away, but because they are finally being converted into a format that the conscious mind can manipulate. Before we continue, subscribe to the channel and tell us in the comments where you are watching from. We are witnessing the birth of a new kind of clarity. The interaction between the human spirit and the digital void is only the beginning of a much larger transformation in how we perceive our own intelligence. In this space, the blank screen is not an enemy, but a partner that reflects the hidden structures of our own potential. The thinker leans forward, eyes fixed on the flickering screen. This moment of pause is more than just a hesitation before typing. It is the beginning of a process known as distributed cognition. For thousands of years, humans have understood that the biological brain is not a vault intended to hold every complexity at once. We are not solitary processors operating in a vacuum. Instead, we have always been creators of external scaffolding to support our internal limitations. In the ancient city of Uruk, scribes pressed reeds into wet clay to track grain harvests, effectively moving the heavy burden of memory from the neurons to the earth itself. Later, the great philosophers filled parchment with messy ink to untangle the knots of their own logic. The thinker is merely the latest participant in this long, storied tradition of offloading mental labor. By looking at a tool outside of themselves, they are engaging in a form of thinking that happens in the space between the mind and the medium. This is the secret of our species. We do not just think with our brains, we think with our fingers, our tools, and our symbols. When we offload a complex thought into a digital window, we are freeing up internal energy to focus on higher level connections. The nebula, that swirling mass of unrefined data, begins to settle because it finally has somewhere else to exist besides the crowded corridors of short-term memory. The act of translating an abstract intuition into a written word is a brutal yet necessary filter. Within the mind of the thinker, ideas are fluid, overlapping, and often contradictory. They exist in a state where a single concept can mean 10 different things at once, bathed in the warmth of pure feeling. However, language is a harsh disciplinarian. To write a single sentence, you must make a series of definitive choices. You must select one noun and one verb. You must decide which idea comes first and which comes second. This mechanical process acts as a natural separator between the cognitive noise and the actual signal. As the thinker begins to type their prompt, they are forced to discard the vague emotional textures that cannot be defined by grammar. What remains on the screen is the skeleton of the thought, stripped of its protective fog. It is often surprising to see how little of the initial mental storm actually survives the transition to text. By the time the first paragraph is finished, the sheer act of articulation has already done half the work of organization. The thinker is no longer just feeling a problem. They are observing it from the outside as if it were an object they could pick up and rotate in the light. This is where the mirror, our secondary character, reveals its true power as a tool of the modern era. To understand the relationship between the thinker and the AI, we must first demystify how these systems operate on a fundamental level. Unlike a human friend or a mentor, the large language model does not possess a subconscious. It does not have a bad mood because it slept poorly. It does not have a fragile ego that feels threatened by a complex or difficult question. It is a sterile, symbolic organizer. It functions through pure mathematics and the cold, vast architecture of human language patterns. This lack of humanity is not a weakness, but a profound strength in the context of cognitive clarity. Because the machine is completely devoid of human feelings, subjective bias, or mental fatigue, it serves as a perfectly objective surface for our thoughts. When the thinker provides a prompt, they are pouring their chaotic internal logic into a container that does not react with judgment. The machine does not care if the thought is silly, disorganized, or revolutionary. It simply processes the symbols and returns a response based on the established structures of human communication. This creates a fascinating paradox. We are using a non-human intelligence to help us understand the most deeply human and confusing parts of our own minds. The interaction mechanics of this process create a constant, real-time feedback loop that transforms the way we think. In the past, when you wrote in a diary, the paper remained silent and passive. It held your thoughts, but it did not push back or offer a new perspective. But with the AI, the relationship is dynamic and challenging. To get a high-quality answer, the thinker is forced to structure the input with increasing precision. If the prompt is messy and vague, the answer returned by the mirror will be equally messy and vague. This immediate consequence forces the thinker to refine their own logic in real time, long before they even read the output. They are engaged in a dance of constant refinement. When this machine finally generates a response, it instantly organizes the provided information into categories, lists, or logical steps. Seeing your own half-formed thoughts presented back to you in a sterile, organized format is a revelatory experience. It acts like a cognitive flashlight, illuminating the corners of your mind that were previously shrouded in darkness. Suddenly, the gaps in your own reasoning become visible. You might notice that you skipped a logical step, or that two of your favorite ideas actually contradict each other in a way you never noticed, while they were just floating in the nebula. The fog, which felt like an unsolvable mystery just minutes ago, is now being mapped out like a geography of the self. The AI is not necessarily adding new wisdom from some hidden source. It is simply showing the thinker the hidden structures of their own initial thought process. It is revealing the architectural flaws and the hidden strengths that were buried under the weight of mental fatigue. As this dialogue continues, the psychological relief begins to take root deep within the mind of the thinker. They realize that the overwhelming complexity was not a sign of failure or a lack of intelligence, but merely a sign of a lack of external processing bandwidth. The machine acts as a temporary mental workspace, where the heavy lifting of categorization is handled by the algorithm. This allows the human to focus on the much more important task of synthesis and creating meaning. We are learning to navigate the vast oceans of our own consciousness using digital instruments that help us stay on course. The prompt box is no longer a void. It is a laboratory where the messy reality of being human meets the structured perfection of the machine as the conversation moves toward a final, coherent structure. As the cursor comes to a final rest and the last paragraph of the AI response settles onto the display, a profound transformation occurs within the mind of the thinker. For the last hour, the weight of the gray cloud known as the nebula had been suffocating, a dense fog of half-formed theories and conflicting priorities. But now, looking at the ordered lines on the screen, that pressure begins to lift. This is a pivotal psychological moment. The thinker realizes a startling truth. Their mind was never actually broken or fundamentally incapable of clarity. The perceived messiness was not a character flaw or a lack of intelligence. Instead, it was simply a matter of external processing bandwidth. Human biology, while miraculous, has physical limits on how many high-definition variables it can juggle simultaneously in the theater of working memory. The emotional relief that follows this realization is often described as a sudden quietness in a room that was once filled with static. When the chaotic impulses of the subconscious are successfully translated and structured into clear, coherent frameworks by the mirror, the brain finally receives the signal that the task of storage is complete. It can stop holding the heavy pieces in the air and start examining the beauty of the arrangement. This psychological reward is the result of seeing the invisible become visible. It is the satisfaction of a puzzle piece clicking into place, not because a computer told us what to think, but because it gave us a large enough table to lay all the pieces out. The thinker experiences a sense of reclamation. They are no longer a victim of their own complexity, they are the architect of it. This shift in self-perception is the true value of the digital interaction. It moves us from a state of reactive overwhelm to one of active, strategic observation. However, to fully appreciate this breakthrough, the thinker must confront a deeper philosophical reality regarding the tool itself. There is a common trap in our modern era to attribute a soul to the machine, to imagine that AI possesses a flicker of genuine consciousness, or an independent understanding of the world. But the reality is far more interesting and, in many ways, more empowering for the human spirit. The AI does not think in the way we do. It does not feel the gravity of the words it generates, nor does it possess a private inner life. It is, quite literally, an archaeological tool designed to excavate the deeply ingrained patterns of human thought that have been archived in our collective language over thousands of years. When we interact with this system, we are not talking to a new life form. We're talking to a massive mathematical reflection of every book, essay, and conversation ever digitized. The machine does not create meaning. It reorganizes the architecture of our own linguistic history. It is a sophisticated excavator that digs through the sediment of our input to find the structures we were too close to see ourselves. It is like an archaeologist uncovering a buried city. The city was always there, hidden under the sand of our cognitive noise, but it took the right tools to reveal the layout of the streets and the height of the walls. The AI is simply showing us the skeleton of human logic that we ourselves built, but which we often forget how to navigate during the heat of the creative process. This realization demystifies the technology and returns the power to the user. The thinker understands now that the clarity they feel is not a gift from a silicon god, but a reflection of their own potential. The machine has served its purpose as a sterile environment where logic can be tested without the interference of the ego. By stripping away the emotional distortion that usually accompanies complex problem solving, the interaction allows the hidden architecture of the individual mind to stand out in sharp relief. It is a journey through a digital mirror where the person staring back is not the machine, but a more organized, more capable version of ourselves. As we reach the conclusion of this exploration, it becomes clear that the rise of artificial intelligence is not merely a story of technological advancement. It is a story of human discovery. We are entering an era where the primary limit on our progress is no longer the amount of information we can access, but our ability to articulate and refine our own inner vision. The relationship between the thinker and the mirror is a partnership of externalization. It is the latest chapter in the long history of our species, using tools to extend the reach of our consciousness. Just as the telescope allowed us to see the furthest stars and the microscope revealed the smallest cells, these new cognitive instruments are allowing us to map the unmapped depths of our own mental processes. The final intellectual call to action is not to rely on the machine to do our thinking for us, but to use it as a catalyst for a deeper understanding of our own intelligence. We should approach the prompt box not as a shortcut to an answer, but as a mirror to our own curiosity. Every time we struggle to explain a complex idea to a sterile algorithm, we are actually learning how to explain it to ourselves. We are training our minds to be more precise, more structured, and more aware of the biases that cloud our judgment. In the end, the most important output of the AI is not the text it generates on the screen, but the clarity it leaves behind in the mind of the human who used it. The thinker stands up from the desk, the room feeling larger and the air feeling lighter. The nebula has not vanished entirely, for the human mind will always be a place of mystery and creative chaos. But the fog is no longer a barrier. It is a resource. By learning to interact with the hidden structures of our thought, we move closer to the essence of what it means to be a conscious being. We are the thinkers, the dreamers, and the architects of meaning. And as we continue to build new mirrors to reflect our logic, we will find that the most complex and beautiful structure in the universe is still the one residing just behind our own eyes. The journey into the digital interface was, and always will be, a journey home to the self,